So, title for today's session is What the Hell Happened to Brand Experience, Events and the Entertainment Industry? So we've got three members of the network on the call today. Let me just give you a bit of an overview in terms of, we all know, I think we feel that one part of the marketing industry and the communications world that's been hardest hit over the last 20 months has been the events, production, experience and live entertainment industry. And the COVID regulations are now easing. So it'll be interesting to see how our panel see the things developing in the future. So on the call today, firstly, Paul Stanway. He's one half of the team that founded XYZ. As creative director, he has oversight of all activities across the client base. His career spans the music industry, theatre, feature film and television production, as well as brand events. In 2020, he completed a master's degree in innovation, creativity, leadership at the Cass Business School, which I believe now is called the Bayes Business School. XYZ as a business are an award-winning brand experience agency that design and deliver a range of live events, interactive and content experiences. They're based in London and they operate internationally with some of the world's best known brands, creating innovation and impactful experiences for their customers, both in media and business audiences. So thank you, Paul, for being on the call. Our second guest is Lindsay Whitehouse. She's the CEO and founder of Integrity. Lindsay's had a background in big conference hotel sort of delivery, and Lindsay entered the event management industry about 30 years ago and has worked on accounts such as Pfizer and Glaxo, so very pharma driven at that time. She was lured up to Edinburgh a few years ago and basically delivered the Edinburgh International Conference Centre, or opened the Edinburgh International Conference Centre as operations director, and then she founded Integrity in 1998. Basically, they began life very focused on pharma. The business extended into tech, finance and associations, and they manage international events for up to maybe 2,000 delegates, alongside senior meetings for up to as few as maybe 30 people. They deliver what they call a butler service to clients who expect the highest attention to detail and delivery. And during COVID, the team has handled virtual meetings for up to 3,000 people. And they've just recently delivered a very successful hybrid event for 900 people in the UK. And Lindsay heads up a team of what was and will soon again be about 14 people. Finally, we have Dominic Baker, and he's the founder and technical director of the production family. Dom has worked across a very diverse range of platforms and in different industries: theatre, music, immersive experience and events. His experience ranges from video design in the West End to production management in Asia and customizing to a tech event in a private, I'm going to get this right, Bohemian island, and to including international music tours. Before finding a TPF, he was previously projects including technical and production delivery for BMW, Bastille, Glastonbury, the National Opera and many more. So with his experience, a full range of technical production to creative direction, and is interested in using groundbreaking technology to realize creative vision. Dom combines creative thinking with technical excellence and knowledge as much as possible. So basically, I think you'll see from this, we've got a very diverse group on the panel. And what we're doing is we've got a set number of questions that we've set out, but please, as I say, do interact. And if you've got any questions, please bring them along. So the first question is basically to the panel: how have the last 20 months been for you and your business? And randomly, because Lindsay's top right, I'll start with Lindsay.
It's been really tough. Obviously, as it has for everybody, quite a journey. I think it was awful in terms of hard decisions. It was awful in terms of how we had sort of handled what we had to handle in the aftermath. But I think it's given us perhaps a much sharper focus. It's enabled us to take a step back from so many things and refocus as to how we go forward. So I think we're smarter perhaps now about what we're doing and how we're going to go about tackling some of the projects that have long eluded us. So I think we've adapted well, and obviously we're not through it yet, so we're still to rebuild. But this year feels a whole lot better than last year. Let's put it that way.
How are things with you, Paul?
Probably much the same actually as Lindsay was saying. I think we had an existential crisis. I think that term's bandied around a lot, but almost overnight, our business model became potentially dangerous and illegal for a time. And I think you go through a grieving process if that's your business. For a time, it was, am I going to have a business at the end of this? Am I going to have a house? That is not dissimilar to grieving. And I think that once we were able to get through that as an individual, as a group of people, then I think for us, the key was to reframe what success was going to look like. Forget the double-digit growth year on year. It's, to paraphrase a podcast I just heard where they're interviewing Jerry Seinfeld, he said, survival is the new success. And that's what it came down to. It's like just being in the game whenever this thing starts to come out is going to be success. And so really modifying expectations was key to then moving forward, like Lindsay was saying, and starting to be smarter and treat this as much as an opportunity as it is appropriate and possible to do.
And Dom, how did you find things?
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul's saying about a sort of mourning process. We were on site with 4 different projects, and they were all about to go live from a kind of 6-month lead-in time to them all. And then overnight, we were told, right, get everything off the site, get everything back, because like you're saying, our companies, our suppliers going to come tomorrow and get equipment because we don't know if it's going to be legal to do so. And so that first period just felt kind of surreal, actually. And then I think, yes, actually quite quickly for us, I think we went, okay, throw everything out the window in terms of what the next couple of years might look like, and let's make a plan for the next 12, 18 months. And, we can plan as best we can and see what happens, and survival at the end is the goal. But with a massive unknown, obviously, of going, right, what is going to happen in the next month, 4 months, 6 months, in the wider picture, obviously. And it kind of weirdly made it feel significant to have that plan, but also slightly insignificant, because you sort of went, what is going on around us? And what we do, obviously, is a very exciting, thing to do, because we bring experience to people, but it's not saving lives, and it's not, sorting out the pandemic, I suppose. So yeah, and then I think, like you're saying, building, to use a really horrible, I was about to say building back, and then I really didn't want to say that, but building from that forward and going, okay, there is a way through this.
It sounds as though you've all had very similar sort of experiences from that point of view. But the other thing that we might be, and I will swap this around to who leads to answer these questions. I mean, as individuals, as persons, and as managers, how have you also felt you've had to change? Paul, start with you on this one. On a personal level, how have you had to change and also adapt and work with your team, and how you manage your team?
It's been pretty steep as a learning curve for sure. And I think that there's an analogy I sort of came to probably about halfway through, and I was talking to my wife about it one night, and it's going to sound a bit strange, but there's that advice when you're traveling to set your watch to the destination time zone as soon as you get on the plane. And it felt like I needed to, as a manager, as a leader of people, set my proverbial watch to not trying to plan too far in advance. Embrace the uncertainty, forget trying to plot too far, and at the risk of sounding like a self-help guru, be more present in the moment and understand what we're dealing with as an organization, as a group of people at that time, and try and make the best of that situation without requiring weeks, months of kind of plotting to be part of that. So it meant reading the room better on an almost daily basis, understanding that everybody's fighting some kind of battle outside of the rectangle of the screen that you see them on. Sometimes you hear the noise of the kids, sometimes you don't. It doesn't mean the problem's gone away or the issues have gone away. And I think certainly not focusing so much on the work, but being a little bit more rounded and pastoral as a manager in the care that we're offering. And because we've had people go through mental health issues, I've certainly been on a roller coaster as an individual, and that is a real business issue now. It's no longer the totally private, disconnected, can be ignored by managers anymore, because it's come crashing into the work that people do, because work has come crashing into where people live. We're not working from home, we're living at work, and that's an important distinction. And that's something we're going to have to deal with going forward.
And Dom, have you found you've had to adapt?
I think one of our kind of challenges we had was at the start of the period, we were growing and recruiting for quite a lot of different positions, and actually going back to individuals who we'd moved quite a long way forward and had a really positive conversations with, and having to put some of those elements on hold was quite a challenging thing to do, actually. And again, you were very aware that these people had just seen their industry disappear overnight and had been were probably shut in their bedroom and would be for the foreseeable, and you were kind of heaping more on top of that. So I think that we definitely spent a lot more time with that process than we probably would have before. And I think that actually we've taken that forward in how we, manage the team and bringing people into our projects. We have a quite organic setup. So we do bring in a lot of consultants and freelancers alongside our core team, and all of those people, again, now we're starting to reopen. These people, some of them haven't done their practice, their trade for the last 12 months. And so people are going to feel differently about the work they're going to do, potentially, need some time to kind of rediscover some of their skills. I think actually being supportive of that and having the patience with that and helping people come back to work is quite different to the fast-paced event industry that we're all kind of used to, where you've got to be on it straight away. So that's been quite an interesting challenge, I think. And then in terms of for us as owners of the business, it's kind of the adapting to a change in team size and a change in the day-to-day of what running your own company looks like. Because obviously, it's been very different in the last 12 months to what it was, for the previous 3-4 years.
Lindsay, just like a little add-on to this particular question, do you think you got closer to the team? You know them better now. You understand them a bit more. You've got a bit more of an understanding of their home environment as much as they've had to be working remotely. Does that, do you think, help? Do you get closer to your team even?
I think that maybe a little bit. I think we've always been a fairly close-knit, not too big team, and so I think we've always known, about what's going on with people, and we've tried to, we've just always tried to have that interaction with them. I think for us the biggest, the adaptation actually is still ongoing. I'm sure it is for a lot of businesses. So we're in the adaptation process, and so for me the biggest surprise was, we can do this from home. and we will be a hybrid working business going forwards. But even in the moment, even literally this morning, we're talking about, well, what might that look like when we go into an office? Because our office, we have now, we won't use that office that we had before. We will use business centre accommodation, and so we're in the process of deciding, well, is that 1 day a week or 2 days a week? So the process, the adaptation is ongoing. But for me personally, as shall we say, a mature person within the industry, I never was convinced that we could. I was convinced we all had to be together. I was absolutely adamant about that. And Kate's on the call today, and she'll be, she'll in a way, she'd be quite right to say, "I told you so," because we are making it work. We both feel that there's got to be an element of being together on a fairly regular basis for that interaction, for that spontaneity, for what you pick up people are talking about, so that you can add value to it. And we haven't worked out how we're going to do that yet.
Well, there's a slight little adjunct to this particular question that might be quite interesting, and I think it would probably apply to everybody on this call. Certainly, sort of people that are managing their team. I mean, have you done any training, or have you done anything in terms of being able to learn a little bit about being able to identify mental health issues that you might have within your team? I mean, have any of you encountered where you've suddenly thought, oh, person X looks like they're having some problems here, and I've got to help them and support them? I mean, I think it's something that probably every business, not just in the marketing industry, must have had this sort of challenge where they've had their team working remotely and suddenly thinking, that person, I think there's a problem there. How do we manage that? And did any of you just randomly throw this one out? Did anybody encounter any of those sort of problems over the last sort of nearly 18 months?
I've encountered one recently, in actual fact, and it's more about the return to work for health, with health concerns. That's come up now for the first time, given that we're approaching at the point that we are. But it's funny actually, because there was a speaker, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, a couple of weeks ago maybe, there was a speaker on the 11 o'clock session, and I asked the question about coaching. It was a coaching I think I tended to agree with the answer, which was actually the one-to-one on Zoom is actually not an unsafe environment, and it is an opportunity. And this happened with, one of our team suffered a bereavement at the end of last year, and lost her mum. And actually, that's how it had to be. It did have to be on Zoom, but I think on the whole, she would say that felt okay to share what needed to be shared, and for us to talk it through and decide what space and time she needed.
Paul, you nodded there. Did you sort of have some issues that you encountered?
Yeah, definitely. I think we had, they can probably be broadly categorized as people struggling when lockdown was really making everyone's world smaller. And as Lindsay said, there have been issues that have cropped up with this return to work, and the fact that people have gotten used to a certain style of work, and now there's a perceived risk to getting onto public transport, coming back into shared offices and so forth. And I think we tried to throughout the whole process, the past 20 months or so, find ways to create those safe spaces. And one of those was that 2 or 3 of the team nominated themselves as people who, 2 o'clock on a Monday, every Monday, anybody could call between 2 and 3 o'clock and just have a chat. No agenda, no requirement to kind of set it up. Because for a long time, every piece of contact we had as individuals had to be scheduled, had an agenda, took place on a rectangle like this. And sometimes an old school phone call felt quite liberating, because it was not another Zoom call, and to not have an agenda and just to talk. So we found that quite successful, and that identified a few people that were struggling for a variety of reasons. And then it's about doing what you can, but not trying to do more than you're perhaps trained or able to do, and to let those people know that they are supported by you as an organization in getting the help that they need. And some people did have to go on and get help. Some people, it was enough to talk and share something, and just have the people around them at work be sensitive to that. So it was no one size fits all. It was feeling your way. But my sister, for instance, has become a mental health first aider. She works for HSBC, and that's something she did over the course of lockdown, which it's been quite successful for that organisation. So I think there are organised, prescriptive ways you can do it, as well as just being more of an empathic human to your fellow colleagues.
I think the other thing is now we're hitting this. This is the last call actually before we have our summer break within the Pimento network, and you guys are getting busy at the moment. Things are starting to hot up a bit, but you've probably got members of your team that have accrued some quite substantial holiday entitlement. And there must be this balance of saying, you know, hey, we've got work on here, but here's an opportunity for you to go off and have a week, 10 days, or go and do something. I mean, are you encouraging your team to take breaks? I mean, Dom, is that something you're trying to make sure for your basic well-being of your members of the team, saying, go and have holiday, go and disappear for a few days, get some me time, basically?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you like you're saying, we're experiencing a sudden kind of rush to try and do as much as possible in the industry and get things going again. And we absolutely have just taken the approach of, if you would like and need that time off, then yes, you should absolutely have it. And, we've just got through the last 18 months, so we can absolutely get through delivering whatever that thing is without, certain members of the team, because I think people have had this weird thing where, in a way, we've all had a lot of time off in the last 18 months where we've not been busy, but of course it hasn't really been restful for anyone, particularly for a kind of, mental health point of view, having a break. And so now that you can do that again, I think it's really important that people do. And I think the other thing I was just going to say is on the kind of the well-being of your team thing. We have a slightly different kind of angle on this, because we deal a lot with performers directly, particularly in the theatre work we do. And we've done probably 10 in-person COVID secure events in the last 12 months. So we've kind of got quite good, I think, at delivering those in a safe way. But you can have all of the kind of, correct procedures, safety, extensive work there, but we quite often encounter that out of a cast of however many, there's a show we're doing at the moment with 5 people on it, even if you can be as robust as possible in your procedures and go a long way above what the government is, mandating that we do, actually, there will quite often still be one person in that team who just, there is no kind of golden answer for them in terms of going, look at all these things we're doing, look at how we're controlling the risk. It is safe for you now, because some people just still don't feel safe. And actually, if you've got that feeling about it, it's very tricky. I think we're finding there's only so much you can reassure people that you are doing everything, and that they're more likely to, we've got a show where someone dances on a roof. The risk of you falling off the roof when you're dancing is probably higher than the risk of you catching COVID in that environment. But obviously, we understand kind of risk management in the events industry, but a performer probably doesn't understand that. And that's been a really challenging one to try and work with people and make sure they feel safe and reassured. But there comes a point where it's almost impossible to completely assure someone that what they're doing is safe.
That's been really sort of useful to get a bit of feel, and I think that hopefully the sort of questions we're discussing here have some relevance to other members of the group on this call, because we're talking specifically about your industries, but so those sort of subjects do impact on anybody that has members, employees within their team. In terms of the other question I was going to go on to is, here we are. How have you found, the industry changing? Both, saying right here, March of last year to August of this year. Have you seen any changes that with your suppliers? We've touched on clients and what they do, but have you seen what changes have you seen, and are they positive or are they negative? Lindsay again, top right. Sorry.
Well, huge change. I mean, it's an innovative business by its very nature, and so we've seen lots of that. I think what strikes us is that it's just a phenomenal amount of businesses that you never would have come across before. I suppose mainly technical, that have just really come into their own. They've mushroomed. Over the course of a year, there are many platforms now available, so I think also what that means is, because there's a lot of choice to do things a different way, hybrid is certainly with us, I think, for good, and so there are choices in terms of how things are done, and I think everybody's going to have to adapt to that. We were talking, for example, about registration systems just this week. It used to be that you went to a company, and because you've got multiple things going through, you signed up with that company. I'm talking about Cvent, for example, even Events Fair, where their whole approach, their business model now needs to change. They've got to catch up with the fact that, there are different technical solutions which impact on registration. So I think, as I've already said, I think we're in the middle of that change still, and things getting off on a slightly different track.
Paul, what have you seen anything within the industry in terms of changes?
Yeah, definitely. I think that excuse me, the stuff I've seen is that suppliers and companies and agencies that are perhaps more equipment oriented have probably found it more difficult because because their inventory means that they can offer a limited set of services, whereas perhaps service agencies have been able to adapt. And I mean, certainly for us, we don't own any equipment, so I'd put ourselves in the latter sort of group of that. We've done about 5 years worth of R&D in 20 months, and we've made some significant changes to how we deliver things, how we think, our processes, the services we offer, and that's not been easy, but it's been required. And I think you can see that a lot, and I think there's probably within that pivot, as the saying goes, that lots of agencies have done. I think you can start to see the difference between those who have actually gone on and proved those changes and delivered them in some way and have those proof points, and those that are just talking about it. I think it was quite easy for lots of companies to talk about how they were doing different things and suggest that they could offer services, but maybe they haven't yet actually had a chance to deliver those yet. And you never know until you deliver something how viable it is, whether it's a prototype or a finished article. So I think we're starting to see the proof points come through as those agencies' clients are starting to get them to do stuff or not do stuff. So yeah, I've seen flexibility and adaptation, but whether it works is the thing that we're still yet to see. I think it's a longer game.
Time will tell. Don,
yeah, definitely.
Got any views in this area at all? Have you seen things?
I think we've seen that both suppliers and clients with a diverse portfolio that work across a range of kind of areas and aren't, don't deliver it just in one sector or niche, have been able to kind of push through and be the most ready to go again at the end of it. And I think where we are now, we're not at the end. I think that we were quite lucky in that same regard, in that one of the reasons we were able to sort of maintain viability and come through it was that we could go over to a sector that was perhaps not as heavily affected by the pandemic as some of the kind of key live in-person experience stuff. And actually, I think companies are trying to, those that perhaps weren't as diverting their work are trying to spread a bit more and make sure they are as flexible as possible so that there is adaptability to deliver what it is that people want to do, which I think is still being figured out. And I think we've seen a lot of clients, there's been quite a variety of ideas that people have wanted to do for activations or events, or even in our theatre work. Actually, I don't think anyone's quite sure what the right thing to do is next that is going to be successful.
Right. Well, thanks for that, everybody. Just a small point. Paul Hackett's put an interesting comment up in the chat about a guide for business leaders, the Thriving at Work Independent Review of Mental Health and Employers. It's on there. There's a hyperlink. So if anybody would find that interesting, thanks, Paul, for putting that to the chat. Let's just sort of move on to a slightly different area now. Again, over the last 17, 18 months, there's been a lot of change. And one of the things that has been brought forward much in everybody's mind, I'm not just talking about the events and the marketing industry here, but I'm talking about generally across, I think, the entire population, is the environment and sustainability. The industry in the past, certainly I remember going to exhibitions, and in fact, I use exhibition carpet in my garage. Remember, when you finish an event, they just rip it up and throw it into a skip. I used to bring it back and repurpose it, but it had a very bad reputation of just and of course with a lot of events, the carbon footprint element. So basically, I mean, do you think as an industry, you as people working in your element of this industry and your clients are having a new refocusing on that whole environmental and sustainability part of any programs they're going to be activating going forward? Is it more front of mind now? And again, randomly, Paul, what's your view on that question?
Yeah, 100%. And actually, predating the pandemic slightly, we became founder members of an organisation called ISLA, that their raison d'etre was to educate agencies to make considered sustainable decisions in the suppliers they use, the processes they use, the designs they make, and also to enable those agencies to educate their clients, but also then to look at auditing and baselining services from suppliers, so that at both ends, that the client decisions were better informed, and that the materials and processes you were going through as an agency would be better. So we're one of 12 agencies that helped found that organization, and we've been putting our teams through workshops and training with that organization, building the checklist so that we're not only making decisions ourselves, but we're also enabling clients to make better decisions, because we've all been under pressure where the budget's creaking and you could go with this idea or this element, but it's maybe 10% more than the cheaper, less sustainable throwaway option. And of course, the client's going to push for effectiveness from a budget point of view. So to be able to explain to them why that should be considered more of an investment than a cost is really important. So for us, it's become a cornerstone of how we engage with clients. And like Dom, we've delivered several projects during the pandemic that have been COVID compliant, and certainly they have been informed largely by this ISLA checklist and this methodology that we're going through with them, and it will become ever more important, as we've seen from the report that was just released, that there's no more time to dance around the theoreticals here. We have got a bad reputation. We've had a well-deserved reputation for waste, and that needs to change.
Are you finding some of the bigger clients are thrusting it upon you to be more environmentally friendly and sustainable? I mean, is the larger brands saying it's actually part of you've seen this maybe in pitch, for RFPs, for example?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We've had conversations, again, predating the pandemic, where sustainability and considered decision making has been talked about as a thread. So rather than there being a sustainability part of the event or the sustainability stand, it's more about throughout the whole process, is it being informed? by that thinking, and I think it's ramping up now, as it should do, and as it should have done a long time ago. But yeah, definitely, it's part of the discussion. Some brands more than others, naming no names, but yeah.
Yeah. And Lindsay, how about in your space? How are you, is it something that's becoming much more visible and awareness within your own business and with your clients?
I would say so. I think it's almost a given now that any meeting is going to be paperless. For example, I think that that was that started to happen long before COVID. But for me, the interesting thing actually, and as an international operator, for me, the interesting thing will be more to do with the travel and how people become perhaps more selective about when they travel to an event. And I'm quite keen to explore the kind of potential for regionalized hybrid events where there may be ways for big companies to get teams together and to kind of broadcast them together into one event, but not necessarily to have to all go the distance, and maybe to look at travel on a more environmentally friendly basis. I mean, that just may not take off, but I've got a feeling companies will want to give that a go as one option, alongside flexing live with virtual and on occasions hybrid. I think what we're hearing already, that particularly in the pharma sector, for example, clients have said to me, we don't need to. We've realised we don't need to do all of these things face to face that we used to do face to face, but we certainly need to do some of them, and that's important because we're building relationships and what have you. So I think they'll want to mix and match.
And Dom, at your end, I mean, how have you seen, or are you seeing a change now?
I think, interestingly, the most reluctance from us probably still comes from mostly from clients who are not. Maybe reluctance is the wrong word, but it's not centered to the conversation. It's not in the middle of how are we delivering this while being sustainable. And actually, we've been talking recently about pushing that forward more and bringing it to them as much as we can, because we are acutely aware that, in our industry where you might make a set for an event, 90% of the time in the past, that set probably was in use for a matter of weeks or months, and then it went in the bin. And that, I think that has changed a lot in the last, before the pandemic, actually. I think what the pandemic has done is it has removed a kind of maybe a fear from individuals in the process of making something to voice a desire to be sustainable. So we were working with a set designer on a project at the moment, and the experience currently has a lot of fake plastic plants in it, as a very real world example. And in the middle of a meeting, quite randomly the other day, a couple of us just said, actually, why don't we have these as real plants, and let's water them and let's rehome them afterwards. And we're talking a significant cost and a lot of stuff, but actually the people being very practical about it, that seems to have started happening now. And it used to be a bit more in the abstract, and now people don't have this nervousness, I think, about saying, actually, I'm not doing it like this, let's do it like that.
Okay, great. Okay, well, that's sort of been quite interesting. In fact, again, another area of how things have changed over the period, or has it changed? Do you feel that you'll be making more use of other techniques like video, using it as a means of making things more engaging, and adding some originality? Are you looking at other services, animation, whatever it might be, in terms of your production ideas or creative ideas in future events? I mean, again, maybe Lindsay, do you think that's going to be a tool you'll be using more of?
Well, we actually, that's an interesting point, David, because we are pure logistics as an agency, and we quite purposefully want to go about, making sure that we know who our partners are. So we're not really that involved in the content of the meeting as such, and we want to go, to the marketplace with more of a complete product. So that was very much for us an incentive in joining Pimento 1 month before COVID arrived. So I would say perhaps I would defer to the two guys more on that. Yeah, to answer that one.
Yeah. Well, Dom, I mean, with you doing the work that you do, I mean, how do you see those areas supporting the work that you do going forward? Do you see it as
I think it will definitely be part of it going forward. I think that the hybrid events, as it were, are going to be around for a long time. I think that certainly in the kind of areas we're in of trying to make, as unique an experience as possible, actually there is a desire to move away from purely using video and purely doing something virtual, because I think, there have been some really amazing things done over the last 18 months with that technology, but I think there is a desire for a bit of a break from that and to move back into something that is in person. But there is definitely a recognition that we need to use technology to help those experiences happen, and that a much larger percentage of the audience are now probably not going to come and see things and are going to want to have some kind of experience at home. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it has to be built into the conversation from the beginning now, but we are seeing less desire to do that. Whether it dips and then comes back after people have kind of had a bit of a break from it, I think will be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I think that may be an interesting question for you, Paul, because you are very predominantly, B2C in terms of your delivery. I mean, have you found, using other sort of platforms like video content, etc., but also interacting with other social platforms and making the events that you do more interactive in terms of working with other social platforms. I mean, I know that you were doing it beforehand, but do you think that will increase as a consequence of what happened in the last 18 months?
Yes, I think, and to build on Dom's point a little as well, I think that we engaged in quite a big development last summer in understanding how we might meaningfully move into hybrid virtual delivery of experiences, because we couldn't do it in person and live. And we did a lot of research, talking to lots of people, and the big thing that came out of that research was that people were telling us they don't want or need more technology in their lives. What they want is more humanity from the technology that they already have. The intention of how you use technology is more crucial than whether it's the shiniest, newest silver box that's come out. And you can use the stuff that people already are familiar with in new ways and more meaningful ways. And I think that's where the future lies, because as Dom rightly says, there is fatigue in passive, what has already become traditional, conventional video calls. How do we make those more impactful? How do we make it feel more like an active participation and less like a passive viewing experience? And that's where you've got to look at other tried and tested areas and how might you introduce those into a video call so it's not a distraction, but it's an addition. It's in creating layers of experience, and that might be found in surprising places. It might be through analog and physical and sensory engagement, where you're able to add those things into the thinking to make something different that hasn't been done before. It's not to say it'll be easy, but then the new most important things really are.
I think if I remember rightly, and when we were talking recently with one of your clients very recently, I mean, you've sent out a pre-pack to all the delegates where they actually have something physical with them before they go on to the actual the event itself virtually.
Yeah.
And I think the feedback from what I gathered from talking to you was very positive.
Absolutely, yeah. It was helping to establish the creative of the campaign that they were launching. So it was something to help set the scene, and that's been a big part of the connector platform that we designed, that I was referring to there, that would enabled us to deliver 3 big pan-European events during varying degrees of lockdown, where people would ordinarily fly into a European city, be in person, and these are actually B2B events rather than B2C events. And so that physical companion fulfilled on one of those a way of establishing the atmosphere and the creative territory in which this event, this context was taking place. But there are also ways in which we can use that idea to help with the storytelling of the experience itself. As you go through it, you unlock and unpack certain things that might help bring to life what you're seeing on screen, but in a way that you can trust through touch, taste, smell, and all sorts of other sensory things that we trust more because we've had them our whole lives. And that's part of the visceral attraction of live events, is that you feel it. You don't just see it, you hear it, you taste it, you smell it, the temperature, all of those things are ways in which we can use physical, analog, sensory elements to augment video. The answer is never going to be just video. It's going to be video plus what.
I'm not sure. I think Tina was due to be on the call. I haven't had a chance to see if she is there, but I remember Tina featured being on a call a few months ago when we were talking about pitching virtually and having to pitch on Zoom, etc., and how some agencies were sending out sort of cakes and biscuits to clients. So when they were sitting there doing the pitch, there was something there for them. So I think a lot of people have been trying lots of different tricks to try and get that engagement more meaningful, and trying to create almost an element of fun. Let's be honest about it. And boy, do we need to have some fun. But anyway, I think that's very interesting. We've got about sort of 10 minutes left on the call. I think there are a couple of really. Paul, by the way, I think has just put up that the hyperlink didn't work. Paul, if anybody wants to get hold of that document, email me. Teresa, you can put my email address or an email address on the chat. If anybody wants that, contact us, and we'll find the correct link via Paul, and we'll forward it on to you accordingly. Anyway, there are a couple of questions that come up. Jill Taylor's raised an interesting question. Is the feeling that 2022 is going to be normal? But are there also clients out there that are concerned maybe that there could be another wave of COVID, and there could be further restrictions? So I've just thrown that question out, maybe to Lindsay. What's your view in terms of that as a question?
I think Annabelle's hinting at something that I think will certainly be the case with some people. So I wouldn't say that we've got a massively wide network, but certainly I'm getting. So from one customer we worked for in the past, for example, they've decided not to do anything till 23, but there are reasons for that. It's an anniversary year for them, but they are by nature very, very cautious, whereas others are going full steam ahead. So, we work for Microsoft, and Microsoft are wanting to do things, but their full expectation, because they are obviously a big company, is that there can be no cancellation charges. So I think we have to find our way through the kind of shared risk, as EICC have termed it. It has to be a shared risk between venues and clients, and so I think there is quite some hesitation in some companies, but a keen desire in most that 22 should be where they do all get back together again. And yeah.
What about how are you seeing things, Dom? Are you thinking that people are hoping? I mean, one other little adjunct to this particular question is, are we? Let's hope we have a normal Christmas. That's what. Yeah, let's hope. But so, how do you see things, Dom, in 22?
I think some of our clients who perhaps the project was quite large scale, or they're able to kind of hold out, and are primarily based around the model of ticket revenue equaling the thing carrying on. They are holding until 22 on the whole, because the risks are too high for them. And I think, like Lindsay's saying, there is still this. We have a really there's an interesting situation where that shared risk thing, I don't think anyone quite knows how to do it yet, because I think clients still are trying to avoid taking that risk and putting it back on us. And it's, I think particularly a challenge for if you've got a very large client and you are operating under them as a smaller business, it doesn't, I don't think, it's not a fair share of the risk. And it, normally isn't anyway, but there's a tricky question around that. But I think that our more nimble clients or projects where they are fundamentally low numbers and it's experience led and it can be done safely and mitigated, they are plowing ahead and trying to do as much as they can. But I think that bigger projects where you've got large numbers of people, if they can afford to hold off until 22, they are.
I think, what this comes down to some degree is, are we going to be bold ourselves as vaccinated populations to press on? That's a $6 million question, I think, right now. I don't think anybody's got an answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's a captual answer for any of these questions, to be perfectly honest. I think there's a really quite an interesting question that Stephen posed, which I think is quite a big one for us to maybe debate. We've got 7 minutes left on the call. I mean, the bottom line is, will it ever be the same again? Do you think that we might look back in 5 years' time and say that COVID actually did us some favours? It made us review how we did things, and the consequences will be that we're better businesses now, and we're behaving better as businesses. I mean, big question. I mean, if we move this call 3 to 5 years ahead, how would you feel generally? What's your view on that vision going forward? Paul, thoughts?
Big question. No pressure. I think, and obviously just my experience, and everyone has their own experience of what's gone on. I think that whether it's too soon to talk about what's gone on having done anybody any favors, I think that a lot of people have had such a rough ride that it's probably a bit raw to be trying to think in those terms. What I would suggest is one of 2 points. The first one being, I think it's brought out the truth, and sometimes that truth is positive truth, and it's brought out the best in people and in situations and in organizations, and sometimes not so much. But I think it's shone a light on the way that we do things, and where those things have not necessarily been fit for purpose or as good as they might have been, that's come out. And there's been brilliant resilience and strength and innovation, and that's come out. So I think thinking in terms of the pandemic as bringing out the truth, maybe more than the best, is possibly a safer territory philosophically. And secondly, I would say that for me, I feel that in terms of will it ever be the same? I'd like to think that it started to bring about the end of binary thinking, in an office or completely remote, in person or completely virtual. I think what we have to start embracing is the nuance and the understanding that there are shades of grey, and that a particular shade of grey might be most appropriate for a particular situation. So getting out of this absolutism and thinking about blended solutions, balanced responses, and interesting combinations of things to bring about the best way of creating a solution for clients.
I think that's a very, very interesting response to that question. I think, thanks for that, Paul. I mean, Lindsay,
I couldn't put that any better.
Actually, it really has rather gazumped everybody on that one.
Remarkably good. Well done, Paul. I think there's opportunity for clients. I really do, to grow their events and reach a much wider audience. So I think on the whole, I feel really optimistic. Probably more optimistic than I did before COVID, actually, for our business.
And Dom, how do you see things Yeah.
I think without attempting to repeat what Paul said, because it was very well put, but I think the shades of grey thing is resonates with me a lot, and that we found quite in a refreshing way that is kind of our approach generally, is that, you know, there is a bespoke solution moving, you know, way to move forward with every single project, and that applying this thing to that thing doesn't work. And I think that is more widely, you know, perhaps taken up as an approach now, and that is quite exciting to work with people that are more interested in going, you know, yes, we could use a bit of that and a bit of this, but let's try and work out something new in the middle. And that's quite nice, because it feels like, you know, you are going to have a more enjoyable and better experience for you and for those experiencing it, if you can work in that way.
Well, I think we're down to the last couple of minutes. I think what I'd like to say is a big thank you to basically everybody on the call. You know, it's been wonderful having Lindsay, Paul and Dom here. I hope you've all found the call interesting. There've been a couple of questions that have been raised that I will follow up on. I think that I hope you've all found it very useful. I know that I have, and it's been wonderful talking this through.